So, oh, the card that's come up for you is be at ease with yourself.
Mm, yeah. Oh, that's so important, isn't it? And I know times when I felt like really almost like fragmented and discombobulated and kind of sort of thing and not happy with myself. And then times when I've just gone, I feel yeah, this is me. Like no matter what happens, like whether there's ups and downs, this is me and I'm solid going, stepping forwards. And there's something really important for a lot of people that I work with and just humans generally is that we go through all of these challenges and we're often questioning who we are, our identity, and maybe checking it, changing how we might be depending on the situation and depending on who it is. But then at the end of the day, who we are sort of remains very personal and very true. So if we can go through all of these losses and all of these kind of challenges without losing ourselves, then that is it's really magical. And whenever I've sort of found, well, times when I've maybe had self doubt or times when I've not necessarily expressed myself as I feel I want to, then the more creative I become, the more I lean into that, and the more I lean into the things that I enjoy and the things that help me, the more aligned I am to myself. And that's where I do just like, yeah, feel more at ease. But I work with so many people who just appear to be fine, but then underneath they just there's something that doesn't feel quite right for them about themselves.
So, do you want to tell our listeners about your work and how you sort of came to art as a therapy? Because you're an
Yeah.
arts psychotherapist. You work with lots of different people, trauma informed therapist. So, you've talked a little bit there about creativity allowing us to be at ease with ourselves. So, where did that journey start for you in the first place?
Yeah. So art's always been a big part of my life. Even as a child, I was creating things. I was whenever there was a TV program, I couldn't just be happy just watching the demonstration. I'd have to be making. And so I've always made things. I've always been creative. And then, carried on through school, went to art college. I studied textiles as a degree and then went into teaching. And I loved teaching for a long time, but then there was something niggling there that didn't quite fit, didn't quite feel right. And that's maybe where there was lots of seeds of possibility of art therapy instead of art teaching. And the idea of there's a big difference between art therapy and arts classes and art teaching. So decided to retrain as an art therapist in 2013. And yeah, so there's been the same amount of time really that I was an art teacher that I'm now art therapist. And what I what art therapy is and what art therapy holds is a space where people can use creativity and the image making and the art materials as a form of sort of mental health support and treatment and self-expression when going through some challenges. And yeah, I've as an art therapist, I've worked in sort of loads of different settings with children and adults, and it's part of my project, I suppose, mission, desire, vision to really help people to be able to express themselves more fully and be creative, recognize their potential, their creative potential, and that's not just making pictures of art on crafts, but it's about problem solving. It's about seeing things from different perspectives and tapping into something that they might have not really looked into for a long time. So back to the card about being at ease with themselves. So many people have things that they might be desperate to do, or it might just keep knocking and it keep coming back. But then a lot of what I speak about is to help people to recognize that and give themselves permission to create again.
I'm hearing that you you didn't feel like you could fully realize your full potential, your mission within the education system. What was it about being in that sort of system that felt restrictive for you, that you felt like you just needed to expand what you were doing already? Because so much of what you're talking about is so needed
Yeah.
in education and for young people, and it's, we've lost a good educator here because they feel that they've not been able to bring everything that they wanted to the table.
I think at the time of that career change, I had this real desire to help people and to go into art psychotherapy. And like, I'd done a lot of research. I'd been on a mini foundation course about it as well. And so I understood what it meant. I knew that it would be, a big piece of work, like it demanding. And so there's that, but there's also the fact that when I was teaching, there's so much emphasis on exams and the techniques, and as well as, it's not just about like techniques, but about experimentation. There's lots of elements to it. But I cared more about the students' well-being really than what grade they got. And when I would see pupils that would really express something really from within, but then it didn't really meet the criteria for a certain grade. It didn't, like, academically, it didn't kind of fulfill something that, so actually they were really expressing something true to them, and that was meaningful for them, or they might not have realized that because the pressure was to get the standards and to do the research about the artists and tick all the boxes. And people can really benefit from that. But then actually for the telling a story and expressing what's really on inside, like taking away that pressure to perform and taking away that pressure to make art that's good was a big piece of the work, a big piece of that. And it's strange, Lucy, because when I was when I first started learning art therapy, I was really aware of the differences between art education and art teaching. There was a real distinction, and there still is, of course. There still is. However, what that made me do was hold back a little bit when I was coming to working with a client. So I'd see somebody in art therapy, and there may be really encouraging that it's not about the outcome, it's about the process. It's not about the destination of where you're going, but it's about that journey. And that applies to so many different things, not just art. But I would maybe hold back if they were stuck with something technical. And sometimes there were sometimes times when, just in that learning stage, where I could have really helped them more by teaching them that specific technique, because that could have enabled them to express something more thoroughly. However, at that time, that early stage, I was quite nervous really about getting it right and wanting to, be a good enough therapist, which we all have this, and I'm wanting to help them to build that resilience as well. However, over years of practice and, working with different people, sometimes like someone I work with could really benefit from that, I suppose, that possibility and that option to manage and problem solve the situation without that guidance. And other people, it's absolutely necessary for their safety to feel that they've got support in that space. Like, maybe an example might be about um, how joining bits of clay together accurately so that it stays together. So it's very much about the technique rather than and teaching that technique wouldn't necessarily infringe on the process and what's been expressed. However, what maybe some things come up, like say if an arm's fallen off a clay model, then we're then addressing that as part of the process. So you can make use of different ups and downs in the art therapy process. So if something didn't go according to plan, then that can be approached, and that can help somebody to gain insight. But then there are times when bringing, like, nowadays I just use whatever's useful. Like, if someone needs some skills, then I bring that in. If somebody needs to go more freestyle and not have any sort of technical guidance, then that works as well. But I don't want to be the person, or I strive not to be anyway, that produces a block, that creates the block. So if the block, we can have lots of creative blocks, but if I can help somebody to overcome a block, then they can maybe express themselves more authentically beyond that.
You are creating a space that feels safe to fail and to try different ideas. And I think in education, we are frightened of failure.
Yeah,
And you, as an educator, and it resonates with me genuinely, it's in that failing, it's through those challenges that we learn that resilience. We learn what we're really about. We learn to be at ease with ourselves and with those difficulties, with
yeah.
those detours. And I was wondering if you could tell the listeners a little bit about this new pace. If you head over to Leslie's website, you'll find loads of information about the different courses and the workbooks that she offers, and we will talk a little bit about that. But a new pace, if you want to explain how you came to this new pace, because I need to slow down.
I need to slow down, and I always say about, there's times I know that I'm doing and practicing what I'm sort of preaching, and then there's times when I just need a little nudge and a little reminder. So a new pace, the idea of a new pace is that, I'll just try and explain as clearly as I can, is it's something that I have developed over years of my own personal experiences, as well as working with clients. And, like, in a lot of the settings that I've worked in, as well as being an art therapist, I've used different therapeutic models to support people. So not everyone's, like, gone down the art therapy route. Sometimes there's just been, like, talking therapies and different things, different relational things, and different experiences of managing mental health. And tied in with some of my own physical health issues and how I've managed that, I created a framework that felt like it was robust enough to feel safe for people to work with, but then also flexible enough for people to really run with, and to pick out which things would be relevant. So a new pace is about, like, the pace framework, where we've got 4 different elements: pause, act, create, and empower. And I do a little step into a new pace hour by hour, which it's a bit cheesy, but that's the idea of where we're going through challenges and maybe changes where we might question our identity, question our decisions, what's happened in our lives, and wonder, like, how we might get through something, maybe feel lots of big emotions that might be hard to understand. Then sometimes people feel that they're forced to stop. And rather than seeing it that way, I see it as recognizing that pause. So recognizing that it's not a force to stop. It might feel like that, but you can feel more empowered and in control of your life if you're acknowledging the pause. And there's lots of times where I've felt that I've been in control of of these pauses, and times when I've felt forced to stop, but it's always been beneficial in the end. So, like, taking time to pause might mean physically resting. It might mean reflecting on life, expressing things in a journal maybe. It might include mindfulness, meditation. It might mean just sitting and staring at the wall or watching TV or just doing nothing sometimes. And then with that kind of piece of taking time to pause, we can then think about and take steps to act. So I work with people who really, really struggle to get stuff done and who um through their emotional experience, it's too overwhelming to maybe do the things that they know that maybe going for a walk might be helpful, listening to some music might be helpful, even going and having a shower or brushing their teeth. They know that these things could be helpful. However, they may be so overwhelmed and so um depressed and so like numb that they can't actively do those things. It might feel like climbing a mountain. And so actually just that nudge to do something and to feel that you've been supported, that we're doing a little thing one step at a time, the micro steps, um, and taking that action really important. And yeah, so there's lots of things about sort of productivity for someone that's really high achieving and really encouraging them to pause, as well as those tiny steps for somebody that is just really, really stuck and maybe they're burnt out. They may have they may be quite ambitious, but then life has done their lifing and like sometimes, especially say midlife, there's a lot of things that come up in midlife that make us then question things, and the psychological impact of the sort of hormones and things can have a big impact. And of course, like yeah, creativity and being able to create something is that encouragement that you can pick up a pen, you can pick up a crayon, you can pick up a paintbrush, and even just 5 minutes of making something can make a big difference. But then also, you can create a life that you want. You can choose to dress in a way that you like or express yourself in a way that you like.
Yeah.
And so that's maybe bringing in elements of creativity that to really encourage that and to bring that forward more. And then the fourth word of pace is empower. And this is partly we tend to like, you know, we might praise other people, but we might not be very kind to ourselves, and to be empowering ourselves and other people might feel like a big leap for a lot of people who struggle to just get out of bed on the morning if they're so down, or they might be anxious about like life. That making those tiny choices and something like within the art therapy space, somebody that's I could ask them a question about what colour that they like, and they might not be able to answer. And then, you know, by the time that they've created something, they're like, yes, pink is my favourite colour, and I love the really vibrant colours. And, you know, and there's a difference with their energy, and they're feeling empowered to choose the colours and to go, I'm gonna make a really direct mark on here, and it's my mark, and I don't need to justify or explain these things unless I want to. So this is where and there's loads and loads of things that come up for feeling empowered. There's lots of translation to like real world examples about things that somebody might feel brave to do, that they might feel that they understand their values and their beliefs and what matters to them more, and that they're able to recognize where they want to be putting boundaries in place and feel more empowered and more confident to respond to the boundaries that they've put in place, and to, you know, to not just um say yes to everybody when they're not supporting themselves. So it feels like a really important framework for me as well as other people that I work with.
People who are able to access these things, there's a huge amount of privilege there. There's a huge amount of choice for a lot of people, but actually, we need to make sure that the work that you're doing in this framework and activities, such as art therapy, are accessible and inclusive for everybody. What are you finding people are really, really feeling pushed up against? Like, what are they really challenged with?
I mean, there's so many different ways to think about people's experiences and think about people's mood and, their challenges overall. I think people often feel that they're the only ones that feel certain emotions, that they're maybe what they're experiencing and what the emotions that they're trying to communicate are wrong, that there's an element of shame with that. And I think this would be the same for, people that appear to be really confident and yet actually like saying they're fine, but underneath they're secretly struggling because they maybe feel pressured to perform, feel that they, as much as I think that people do talk about mental health and mental illness more these days, I still think that there is a lot of stigma around this in term and talked about as mindset or as almost like if you've not got the right mindset, then you're the problem sort of thing. It's sort of locating the problem in individuals. But I don't think this is anybody's fault particularly. I think it's just that there's so much information out there about how to improve your mental health and what you, maybe that narrative of what you should be doing, a narrative of growth mindset, for example, is great. I love that, that there's always a possibility. We can learn so much. And if you haven't been able to do something up until a point, then we can improve and we can take steps forwards. However, for many people, that can induce some shame because they might be thinking, well, I don't feel like I can. I feel really stuck. And that narrative of, well, does that mean I've got a fixed mindset? Am I doing this wrong? And I suppose, in a weird roundabout way, calling it growth mindset and fixed mindset is a little bit of a fixed mindset, rather than kind of thinking we all have times when we're feeling stuck and times when we have doubt, and we all have times when we go, I'm on it. I'm doing this. It's like I could go for a run round the block or walk round the block like now. And then I was going, right, I'm going to enter a marathon. And then 2 days later, after I've entered the marathon, no, that's not possible. I can't do this at all. I'm not going to do this. So I think there's loads of things that people feel pressure to get right, and there's lots of confusion, as well as as well as lots of systemic issues about finances, opportunities. Like you said, some people get loads of opportunities to learn and grow and, employment opportunities and like whatever it is, and other people maybe feel that they can't, it's not for them, or they've not got the options to do it, or they can't physically get there because they've not got transport or whatever it is. And I think this is maybe part of a recognition that we often do sort of we do therapy very much as individuals, but we don't, and we might talk about the impact of their experiences and they might communicate all these experiences. But then imagine if we were to sort of do it more collectively. So we might do groups and we have groups that's a pocket, but then imagine if the therapist came in and sort of gathered the world together and went, okay, where are we at? Who's feeling wobbly here? Who's feeling that they have to stand up and pretend to be the leader and pretend to have it all figured out when you're also feeling anxious and yeah. So there's a bit of a, I mean, in the world there's always goodness and badness and ups and downs, and we see it through the lens of where we're at. Um but yeah, I do think people might feel quite overwhelmed.
The world is very noisy at the moment. There's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of resentment, there are questions, there are answers that we need. And when you are trying to survive against that backdrop, it's very easy then to slip into, "Oh, am I doing it right? What difference can I make? Why am I doing what I'm doing?" It's that those questions. It's almost like it feels like we're having like a collective existential crisis in some ways. That's
Yeah.
how it feels for me anyway, and I don't know if that will resonate with the listeners, but it feels like there are so many things that we're trying to untangle and understand and reconcile personally, but also collectively. And I think you are only one person. I am only one person. The ripple effect that you and your work has is huge. But I think the question is, how do we sustain that? How do we, coming back to pace, how do we empower people to make those long lasting changes?
So I work with individuals, usually online, and I think, that's flexible, as well as, like, groups sometimes and then digital courses. So the kind of, I suppose, the lowest access course, that I have some free things as well, but the smallest course that I have is the Creative Healing Kickstart, and it gives people really bite-sized information and videos from me to help people to understand what it is that they're wanting to use art for, creativity for, depending on their energy levels, depending on their mood. So for some people, they might be thinking, I want to express something, I want to make something to express myself, but then their emotions might be quite flat. So actually, what it ends up being is to regulate and up-regulate. So that balance between expression and nervous system regulation. So that's the kind of a kickstart to get you started if you've not made any art for a long time and you're wanting to use creativity and art making for self-care. That's an ideal option. And then I have a course which is partly digital and partly a one-to-one service, and that's called the Creative R&R, and it's a little bit more of a step up from the last one because there's a lot more depth. It follows the PACE model, so there's activities to do with creativity and emotional support, things that you can do to reflect and develop yourself there. And sometimes people choose to have extra one-to-one during that time that they're accessing that course, which the actual course content can be just watched in your own time. But then, yeah, sometimes people really value that direct um, space being held. And then I have a longer program that I do just once a year called Creative Flow program. They're all called creative something. So and that's where it feels more juicy, that is not just about self-care, but it's about just really helping people to really spend and prioritize their creativity. So this is where I am literally, I have a hat where I'm me as an artist, I'm mentoring people, and then sometimes I put the art therapy hat on, and sometimes it's more like the techniques and the teaching. And the idea of creative flow is that when there's time allowed and when people are given permission to really honour and be at ease with their creativity and at ease with themselves, then what comes out of the other side is something that really it's sustained, it's sustainable, and it's not just a quick fix. So that's why I don't
Mm.
do that sort of all the time. Um, but I'm looking forward to running that again sort of in the middle of this year. It's usually about June that we do that. And I think there's a real importance from what you said about how, people don't always feel that they can access these things. Um, it does feel like coming together as a group's really important because people feel like that they're the only ones with the existential crisis and the real questioning themselves. And then when they come together and they realize that other people are holding the weight and the emotions of all of the collective trauma, shall we say, the world, and so many things that are going on, when they realise that they're not the only one that's picking up on this and realising this, and that it's not that there's something wrong with them, it's just the experiences that they've been through, which is where this trauma-informed approach comes in.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about trauma-informed work.
Mm.
How does that shape the work that you're doing?
I think in every single setting that I've worked in, there's always been an element of recognizing people's experiences and people's developmental trauma or like losses, separation, all of those things that would may have happened at an early age, or maybe happening in the workplace, maybe happening in different parts of their life. And it's really recognizing that it's not about what's wrong with somebody or how someone's presenting and instantly needing to reframe those thoughts and those feelings, but more about recognizing why somebody might feel angry, why somebody might feel a mistrust towards authority, for instance, and really recognizing that those experiences that that person's been through makes sense for those emotions. It completely makes sense that we're feeling angry, mad, sad, depressed when all of these things have happened. And actually, it's a very logical, sensible reaction to abuse and to trauma and to systemic kind of. I can't remember how you described it. That existential, collective existential angst. It makes sense that you would be feeling like that. So being trauma informed means helping people to feel safe. It means recognizing the impact of their experiences and of society, the world. It then means helping them to build trust and trust in themselves first. It also means recognizing my flaws as well. So rather than me saying to them, "Well, hang on, it's a safe space here. You can trust me." How am I? Who am I to say that? Because I'm not, I'm not coming along and saying I'm going to be the one that solves all of your things that are going on for you. I'm just here to hold space, and I'm not offering you a magical solution. I'm just going to sit beside you, and sometimes that art making space, whether it's online or whether it's in person, you can still feel that you're really connected with someone and in the dirt with them a little bit as well. It's kind of sometimes that real cathartic, visceral use of art materials can feel very painful. And I'm not there to say we're making a pretty picture to make it look nice and then transform your emotions instantly to be positive or to feel instantly empowered, but to actually allow you to empower yourself to express the mess, that messy middle, as well as to when you can feel the lower, like disempowering emotions, things that, you know, I'm reluctant to call things positive or negative emotions because they are just there. When you can feel, when you don't allow yourself to feel the sadness or the anger, you feel rubbish for feeling those things. You also push down gratitude and joy and curiosity. And that's where I'm kind of, yeah, we all have all of those things.
I think as educators, I'm sure that you and I will both agree that there needs to be um, real work in supporting our children and our young people to understand that they have what they need within them
Yeah.
to survive and to thrive. I think it comes back to that card, children and young people being at ease with themselves. They've got so much online to compare themselves with these days. And yeah, it's a huge worry, not only as an educator, but as a parent as well. It's something that I ponder quite a lot. um, I was wondering if you had any sort of artists that inspired you, or any books that you're reading at the moment that you're gravitating towards, that some of our listeners might want to explore as well after this episode.
Oh, I mean, there's so many artists. There's thousands and thousands of artists. I mean, it's really hard to know what to name sort of particular ones. The ones that come to my mind now are sort of Gustav Klimt. I really like sort of his paintings. I really like kind of the sort of abstracts, sort of expressive qualities in people's art as well. Um, I work in a very abstract, expressive, messy, like more like painting these days, whereas my background was textiles, and I'll look in awe at a piece that's really realistic and that's really, um, hyper realistic, and I'll just stare and I'll look in awe at those things. But then when it comes to my own making, I love, like, lots of spontaneous gestural movements and lots of colour. So any artists that are either inspiring me to do something a bit different or inspiring me to slow down and just gaze at the painting. Like, I'm in Leeds and at the gallery, I went to the gallery just a few weeks ago, and I've been to this same exhibition for so many times, and every time I go, or in fact, sometimes I go and I'll just walk through really, really quickly. Other times I'll go. This time, I was just gazing at these pieces just for longer than felt I'd ever done before. But so it's really important to not just look, but to allow yourself to see. And that can be the same looking outwards and looking inwards. Um, but yeah, there's so many artists, and yeah, it's probably something that I need to revisit as well for myself and just remember who I enjoy looking at.
I know I was gonna say, as when you're creative, you're so often just in the process that you forget that you are inspired by so many different things. So, for those people who are listening, if you feel a little bit stuck, sometimes it is about going back to those artists, the music that you are inspired by, the books that maybe, sparked ideas. That's something that you could possibly do at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
But go on, Leslie.
Yeah,
I
but
interrupted. I
oh, no, it's
apologize.
alright, but, yeah, I'm just thinking about kind of some people like Vincent van Gogh and, like, the Starry, Starry Night paintings and those kind of things that, like, we take some of these old sort of masters and painters for granted, but then in the context of them being made, it's kind of, well, actually, how do you manage to do that in that situation? So there's loads and loads of people, like lots of landscape artists that I love and lots like that. But yeah, there's a book that I'm reading at the moment that would be good to share about. Um, it's called The Big Leap, and it's Gay Hendricks, and I'm going through it, and it gets me to really journal and question things. And the idea of it is that we often create this limitation. We can create a limitation for ourselves, and we end up being it's maybe like people that are quite high achievers, that they are working in a bit of a zone of excellence, or they're doing things and coasting along, doing very well, getting to a certain part, but then feeling a bit stuck. It's like, well, I want more from my life. And this is about leaping through from that zone of excellence and performance. There is a sense about performance when we're at that zone of excellence, feeling that we're performing for somebody or something. But then when we leap into that zone of genius, that's when it becomes more of an identity shift. And I am only at that point in the book. I don't know the next bit. So anyone that's already read this book, you may be thinking, well, oh, you're in for a treat next. But what I love about that is it challenging me. And as I say this, I'm thinking about what I previously said about growth mindset and how that can be hard for people. At the same time, being feeling empowered to do more. So it's maybe fits with the messy middle of there's contradictions all the time that we're constantly thinking, well, oh, I feel quite stuck with that. I'm not liking that. Is that because I'm not doing the work, or is that because I'm genuinely kind of feeling kind of overwhelmed by this? And that big leap it's partly really empowering, but it's also a bit scary.
And that's a great recommendation. I am always keen to broaden my reading material. So at the moment, I'm reading 10 Survival Skills for a World in Flux. This is
Ooh.
by Tom Fletcher. Have you read it?
No, I haven't. Oh, no, yeah, I'll put that on my list.
Yeah, it's to thrive in the 21st century. We all need to understand the challenges coming our way and start adapting now. So obviously it takes in all of the sort of overlapping global crises ahead of us. But talking about really leaning into our creativity and collective creativity, communities coming together, allowing other people to shape our world. And I think what I'm so grateful for is this platform and the connections that I'm making, because I think you and I, Lesley, have a couple of people uh, that are within the same sort of network, which is lovely through Instagram. And it's so precious, and I do appreciate it so much. What's the plan for this year? Do you have a plan for 2026? I know a lot of people are like, oh no, stop with the plans, stop with the I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but have you got an idea of what you would like to do or focus on this year?
So I'd like to be working with, like, doing more groups, working with different organizations, and I suppose that what that means is spreading the word more and collaborating with more people. So, whatever that looks like, different charities, maybe different workspaces, and carrying on doing more of that. I feel like my years started off well in terms of collaboration. That idea of, we can often feel that we're in competition with people, but when you actually meet them and speak to them and think about share skills and share ideas, then you can work together, and that's how we end up having a bigger impact. Um, as well, something that I've been procrastinating on, let's say, or finding the right time, is that within the New Pace framework, within that, I'm writing a book. And so I've set myself a deadline of sort of my birthday in October to have the first draft done. And it's to do with a new pace. And public accountability here, but it's to do with a new pace of that. It's also bringing in some of my own experiences, like some of the health things that I've experienced, and some of, like, times when I've been hiking and things like that. Um, so it's a bit of a mixture of things that I've learned along the way, and sort of ideas and concepts, and yeah. But we shall see how that evolves. But yeah, I'm quite excited about that, and I think the more people I tell, the more it's going to happen, because it's been in the pipeline for a while, in some guys. But yeah, that's the biggest shift, I think, that will be going on this year. Yeah, so there might be somebody on your podcast in the future recommending my book.